Thanks everyone for coming here and supporting my first time at Contact in the desert. So thank you very much for that indeed. Really in appreciation. And the mic, little, yep. How's that? Yay, thank you for that. See, I'm a newbie. So I'm going to be taking you on a journey. I'm going to be taking you on a journey of the long-lost history of Stonehenge that is repressed 100%, but I'm going to take you beyond ley lines. I love you cousins from across the pond, as you guys say, but you're so fixed on ley lines and grid lines. I really want to give you a more holistic understanding of the Earth and her Earth energies and take you beyond that, because Europe's beyond it, England's beyond it. And to really grow as a culture, we need to identify with Gaia's energy. I'm also going to take you on a pictorial journey around Stonehenge, but not the tourist route. Yep. Not the tourist route, because they say to you, this is the route to Stonehenge, but I'm going to show you that Stonehenge is surrounded by military camp after military camp after military camp, and Stonehenge is in the middle of that, yeah? And that they have access and literally hold on to the ancient sites and the information. So I'm going to introduce you to the Salisbury Plain in a moment, okay? That's where Stonehenge is sited. And as we go through the presentation, I'm going to show you how Earth energies interact with the solar energies of the sun god Ra, or Lug, or Apollo, or from wherever culture you are, because there's a two-thing going on. It isn't just about the Earth. It's about the sun and the sun rays as well. So we're going to go to the Salisbury Plain. And this is the Salisbury Plain. It's a high elevated ground of a chalk plateau of which Stonehenge is sited above. And she is gorgeous, this landscape, yeah? It's got a softness about it. It really has. And when you're on that landscape, you feel that you can touch the sky because you're on such elevated ground. And it has a deep, deep beauty. But if you go just literally a step beyond where you should go, you're on the military land of the MOD. And they have a lot of experiments done out near Stonehenge. And this is the type of environment that they have created. So really, to get the truth of Stonehenge, you have to go onto the military land, okay? And you have to be able to read the military codes that they have on the Salisbury Plain. And this is what the tourists don't see, okay? So when I take tours out to Aveby and Stonehenge, I'm going to say, yeah, your tour guides will probably take you down this road and that road, but let's see the plain for the truth of what it is. Because wherever you have power centers and powerful earth energies, you will have the military, make no mistake. Access is denied by the military, yeah? And it was said by another presenter here today that you have, lots of sites in places like South Africa. Well, on the Salisbury Plain alone, and this is a small 25-mile by 25-mile area, you have 2,500 monuments, which our ancient ancestors built surrounding Stonehenge, okay? So it's not just Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a part of a much, much wider environment. And the military, they have kind of placed their strategic points on very powerful energies that we'll have a look at in a moment. And when you go around the plain, this is what you see. You see a kind of area where they practice all the military maneuvers. And it's kind of hidden behind the scenes, like I said. They don't want you to see what's happening on the Salisbury Plain. They really, really don't. But a lot of people have looked at the ancient sites like Stonehenge and Avebury and the pyramids themselves and have been overwhelmed by the monuments our ancestors left behind. But who were the ancestors and why did they build Stonehenge and what was it used for? Are three fundamental questions that have hardly been answered. So when we look to our ancient past, we need to look at some of their monuments to really understand them. And in the Neolithic period, that's about 5,500 years ago, if we use orthodox time scale, okay? And I'm sure that they're much, much older than that. Well, the ancestors of ancient Britain that built Stonehenge, and the evidence is clear and unambiguous in the landscape, they built these sort of temples, and they're called long barrows. Now, a long barrow is very elongated in shape. Okay, it's really long, and we can see the length of it in the photograph, and you kind of go inside them within these megalithic cave-like structures. That's a long barrow, and in phase 1, it was probably used as an initiation center, and as we'll see, they have specific types of earth energy associated with them, and then later on, they were closed down. There is, in Europe, okay, there is over 20,000 long barrows, okay, all across Europe, built by the Neolithic people. And the question, I mean, I've studied archaeology. I'm a second-generation Dowser and mystic, but I also have studied archaeology at Oxford University and Bath University. And one question that they never addressed was, why, in 2500 BC, were over 20,000 long barrows decommissioned, infilled, and sealed off for all time across Europe? Why? And I'm going to answer that question because this history will take you down some twists and some turns. So when I looked into the long barrows of the Wiltshire and European type of styles of them, I thought, well, who built them? Who built them and why? Well, there's a really amazing, very top female archaeologist called Maria Gimbutas, and she's from Lithuania, and she has decoded over at least 10,000 long barrows, and what she noticed in her research was that they literally are figured out in the shape of a goddess in the landscape. So she felt that this culture was very feminine and guided by the moon, okay? Now, we think we know Stonehenge. We are so familiar with the iconic image that's what we think Stonehenge was like. It really isn't like that, and that's what I'm going to show you. For instance, standing in front of Stonehenge, there was a monument in the Neolithic era, 5,500 years ago, that was 2 miles long, 10 to 15 feet tall, built of chalk block, and this is what it looked like. It's called the Cursus Monument, okay, and that stood in front of Stonehenge, yeah? Sadly, it got ploughed out in 1794 or thereabouts, but we must imagine that, like I said, these walls are massive, and it went for 2 miles. It's extraordinary, built by the Neolithic people, but there are other Cursus monuments, this is what it's called, in the English and European landscapes that are up to 7 miles long. Okay? They're extraordinary and created to literally enhance some energies, but there's also strange radiation levels, gamma radiation levels in the near esoteric center of these monuments. And in most Stonehenge books, they don't talk about these monuments, okay? Because they don't fit into the model that we're spoon-fed it should fit into. So the barrows on the Salisbury Plain were timber structured, like massive long houses and long halls, yeah? And we've got a timber structure here from Stonehenge next to a megalithic structure in Oxfordshire called Wayland's Smithy. And these are known to have acoustic properties about them. So when you go inside these chambers and say you said a word, you get the reverb of the word back at you as well. So they certainly have acoustic properties built into them. They also resonate with particular types of earth energy we're going to look at that change your brain frequency as well, and that's quite intriguing. So these are the kind of Neolithic monuments. Now, these predate the stone circles by 1,500 years. So you're looking at two cultures, a stone circle building phase culture and a much older culture called the Neolithic that built these long, elongated monuments, okay? Now, the largest long barrow in northwest Europe is very close to Stonehenge, okay? And we're going to discover that this was a place of a high queen or a high priestess. So it's massive. If you imagine a monument up to 400 feet long, 300 feet wide, and it's on that no-go zone, military occupation on the Salisbury Plain, okay? And do you know what the military used this magnificent barrow for? To practice tank activities by going up the barrow, along the barrow, and down. But credit to our ancestors. Even though it had tonnage after tonnage after tonnage of tanks going across its back, it never crumbled. Yeah, that's the technology of our ancient ancestors. Well, again, I'm in a kind of mystic community, and I'm in an archaeological community, and so I said, well, this is the largest long barrow in northwest Europe. Do you know who's been interned inside it? And everybody was going, no, no, no. So I thought, I've got to find out why. And I was drawn to find out why and who was interned. Because these megalithic long barrows normally housed up to 50 burial deposits in its final stage, okay? And burial deposits, I mean the skull, the vertebrae, and the long bone. Once you have a femur bone, you can measure the height of people. Yeah, anthropologists and police use that formula. You literally times your femur bone by 3.74, and you get the estimated height of a person. So we've got lots of details and clues in the landscape. So I decided, I thought, wow, this huge barrow of northwest Europe must have housed hundreds and hundreds of the Stonehenge people. I think I've hit bingo, I said to myself, okay? But when I investigated it, I found that wasn't true. It was very different. It was for one person and one person alone. The ancient antiquarian reports describe that they found one skull and one skull alone. And I thought, well, I have to now find out where that skull is and really try to investigate it. And this is where I had a lot of door slamming in my face. Because you try to investigate something in England, and sadly so, I live in a very classist, academic environment, where if you're not an academic, you can't have access to anything at all, okay? So I had to go to university, write a university paper, and then have access to certain parts of Oxford and Cambridge, because it's run by the elite. Yeah, and it's very hard to go beyond that. So I decided who was interned in that. And what I discovered was it was for a woman, and I thought I've got to find out what she looked like, and I'm going to show you what she looked like. She had an immensely long skull compared to our skull, which is very round. And she had very narrow features coming down her face. Her ears are very offset, almost pixie-like, towards the back of her head. And she was very short. I mean, people talk about the Neolithic and giants. I challenge that and say that came later in 2500 BC because her femur bone showed that the people with elongated long skulls in the Stonehenge environs were very short but very stocky. So I thought, well, I'm going to arrange appointments at Oxford to see this skull, okay? And so I literally thought, I'll get on the phone and phone up Oxford University and phoned them up. And they said, well, yeah, of course you can see the skull, Maria. You've studied with us. Have you got the catalogue number? And I said, no. Do you need one? Oh, yeah, you can't see it unless you have the catalogue number. Well, can I have the catalogue number? No. So I thought, well, how am I stupid? How am I going to do this? But I'm a bit canny, and I'm quite a good little dowser, and I hope some of you will be attending my workshop, so I thought I'd douse for it, and then I'll phone them back up, and that's what I did, and I got access to her, yeah? And like I said on the panel, I'm passionate about the earth and druidry. I'm a trained druid and Wiccan, and I love the earth and earth energies. And I know sometimes my spirits, my goddess Caridwen, she's around me. So I was with the curator at Oxford University, and I just put it out to Great Spirit, get the curator out the way for 5 minutes so I can be around this skull. And literally her pager, they use pagers at Cambridge University. Really, when you've got a phone? And her pager went off, and she said, "You don't mind me being alone, do you, Maria, with this skull for just 5 minutes?" No, of course not. And she said, "You're only licensed to take one photograph." "Yeah, I only take one photograph." But I had one camera that would take one photograph, and hidden behind me, I had another one where I could take lots of photographs. Yeah. So I was trying to play the game. But it gave me that one moment in time, because none of these skulls had been seen since 1930, okay? None. Nobody had visited them. Nobody had asked the question, who built Stonehenge? Yeah? It's absolutely really crazy when you think about it. So I put my hands over her throat chakra and her third eye chakra and went along the back of her head, and it is really very long. And I felt 2 pulse points towards her crown chakra. I think those that lived in the past, rather, who had an elongated skull may have had 2 crown chakras that made them very sensitive to the land and the energies. That's where we're going to have a look at in a moment. So I thought, wow, I've literally found a long-skulled person. I wonder who else was in the long barrows around Stonehenge and elsewhere. And I investigated and found, lo and behold, all of the long barrows, most of which are around Stonehenge and northwest Europe, contained very long, elongated, skulled people. So the next question is, what happened to them, or where are they today? Yeah, because they seemingly have been off the face of the planet, and that's what we're going to come to. But the magical thing about the Neolithic period is this. The people there, the long-skulled people, laid out the ley line network. Why and how do we know that? When you look at a ley line, for example, it has a multitude of different time periods associated with it. By that I mean you will have a Neolithic monument, a Bronze Age stone circle, 1,500 years later, the Druids, 1,500 years later, the Romans, who occupied Great Britain, then the Saxons placed things on the ley lines, and then the Masons, yeah, surprise, surprise. And the Christians placed their churches upon them. So do you see what I mean? You have a multitude of different cultures using the same ley line network that was laid out in the Neolithic period, because the oldest monuments on the leys are Neolithic. It's undeniable and indisputable because it's in the landscape. So when we think about the ley line network, and I'm going to introduce other energies to you, we need to think back to these people could literally, I'm going to show you, control different types of earth energy and convert negative geopathic stress into positive energy. And geopathic stress means negative earth energy. Are you aware of geopathic stress? Yep, I'm sure some of us are, and we're going to be having a look at how they could convert that with the standing stones placed upon them. But we really need to return to the Salisbury Plain, because these long barrows that are very elongated in shape, again, are the ones that have the really important finds are owned by the military. Yeah, and if you try to sneak yourself on there, and you have to read the Salisbury Plain, because if a red flag is flying high in the wind, that means you can't turn in that direction. There's live ammo going over your head. Yeah, so it's very difficult to get onto the plain, but under the guise of an archaeological project, I got access to some of these mounds. And these mounds have had nobody interacting with them for thousands of years. They're forgotten. They're like a whisper in time that people have forgot. And we should be reconnecting now to the earth and to the ancient sites, and to really galvanize ourselves and our friends to go to ancient sites and reconnect with the earth energies there will allow us to grow, I feel, as a community. So these long barrows that literally do surround Stonehenge in a massive circular shape, and they sometimes even point to Stonehenge, has symbolism in itself. So I decided one day to investigate other areas. Okay, you've got a high queen. She was the first person in the Neolithic to have a long barrow to herself. Is there any others? And is there any male elongated skulled people in a similar position to her? And I thought it's got to be. But again, it's on military land, and you were denied access. Well, one thing I do know about the military, and I hope no terrorist is listening in on this, but they go home for tea on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah? It's so British, it's ridiculous, So I thought, okay, you go home for tea on a Sunday afternoon. What happens if I go onto the military land with a friend and we try and have access to it? They're either going to, kick us off, or at least we get there, so to speak. So that's what I decided to do. I went beyond that red flag, because I knew they weren't there on a Sunday, and that red flag means you can't cross that. Do you see what I mean? That's their little code. It's very high-tech with the British military, isn't it, with red flags? I mean, it's, again, that is just so English. So I decided to go beyond that flag and sneak over onto the Salisbury Plain and literally tap on the barrow to ask the ancestors for permission for me to be there. Because in Druidry, you have to ask the spirit of place, the ancestors, and the guardian permission to be on the site. Because some sites might not want you, okay? But we take it in our Western mindset. Oh, I'm off on my little bucket list to Stonehenge. Does Stonehenge really want you? So in Druidry, you have to be accepted for that, because the ancient ancestors laid out literally the guardians of the lays. Now, the guardians of the lays will manifest, and numerous people across England have seen the guardians of the lays, because they manifest themselves as a black dog, but not your average black dog. This is a dog up here. Yeah, it's like an Anubis figure, and you need to, be very respectful. So when you go to the English countryside and you're having your pint of beer, if you're in England, or your cream tea or whatever, you might be in the Black Dog pub, the Black Dog Cafe. It's there and everywhere, because in Druidry, it's one of the guardians. So I went there and I gave an offering to the guardian dog, the Anubis-style figure, and realized that there was all male deposit in that barrow on that military landscape. And the skulls gave a story to themselves, because they all showed signs of being murdered, okay? So now I had a murder mystery on my hand, but I love Agatha Christie, okay? She's, and as a little aside, I love Agatha Christie so much because she was a pioneer woman in her day, writing in a man's world. In every single one of my book, there's at least 4 quotes from one of her films that I've weaved into the story of Stonehenge. Okay, so these people had been murdered in Bowles Barrow on that military land. One had been beheaded, yeah? Now, so you've got a beheaded person going on. You've got children, yeah? From the age of 3, 6, and upwards. You have old men in their prime, all put into this barrow, and as if to hide their truth and their being for all time, they were like imprisoned in this stonework, okay? So when the early antiquarians, that's the early archaeologists, went to undig these places, rocks were falling down on them, and it became very dangerous. So whoever put those stones on top of those mounds did so deliberately, so the further generations couldn't find the interned. Yeah, so that's a bit of a mystery in itself as well. So I thought I've got to unsolve all of this as well. And in the meantime, all of the establishments were saying there's no such thing as elongated skulls in England. No, none whatsoever. So I went back to Oxford University, and if you imagine now in your mind's eye a room 4 times bigger than this, at least 3 times higher, and you've got cardboard boxes for about 40 high, row after row after row, with Abydos, Egypt that side and Stonehenge that side. That's what our universities have at their disposal, where we don't even know what's in those boxes. Okay? You could have artifacts saying that there were seeded races. You could have anything in those boxes, okay? And all they're marked with the male and female astrological sign, okay? So, I mean, that is a disgrace. It really is. We should know our past so that we can step forward into our future. And like I say, at the moment, I've requested DNA sampling, filming of these, and I've already had literally a massive door and a slight warning as well. Why are you doing this? So I've got some very prestigious academics now on my side that are saying, let's knock back harder. Yeah, and find this DNA sampling for one. Because once you've got teeth, you can do isotopes, you can do so much with that knowledge. So what were these elongated people looking for in the landscape? Why did they place Stonehenge where they did? Why did they build all of these long barrows and make monuments 7 miles long? Okay, why? And is there these energies in the landscape that maybe their skulls could sense better than ours? And if so, what are they? Okay, so I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey now, looking at the earth energies of ancient sites to give a kind of holistic understanding of the art of placement. Because to our ancient ancestors, you have particular energies that are very good for your physical body. You have earth energies that are good for your emotional side, and so on and so forth. And by understanding the energies of Gaia, we can start living in harmony with her, can't we? So could you imagine a new hospital build that says, okay, that energy there is very good, it opens up your throat chakra. Well, we could have autistic kids on that, people with stammers. Do you see what I mean? Where you can go with this? You can really, really run with it. And that's why I train up some architects that are Europeans into decoding sites. And then if you have an earth energy that can make your bone density better, then you can start at self-healing the more mature people in a growing older population as well at half the price of the pharmaceuticals, yeah? And at a natural way of being in an energy field rather than taking the meds, okay? So the way I see moving forward with earth energy is introducing it to the medical establishment, architecture, and schools especially, okay, where I do give my time freely to educate young people in dowsing and interacting with earth energies. And do you know what? Kids are amazing. They just run to the energies yeah? And go, I feel it over here, Maria. It's over here. It is a wonder to see children, because we need to educate the younger people to change the system. Okay, and to expect to live in harmony with the earth. Now, we've all probably heard that rainwater falling from the sky fills up the underground streams and aquifers, and that's what happens with rainwater, okay? Now, when that happens, that's called groundwater, okay? So it's raining, and don't I know, in England, it's always raining. Wow, when I got off the plane and felt that heat at LA, I thought, oh, this is wonderful. Might not be saying that at noon, but it is wonderful. Now, this energy gives off this particular energy pattern. Can you see? It has a bit called the stream band. It's a triad, and it will give off a ghostly image of itself called a parallel force field, okay? Now, in the old medieval times, if you were on the center of the stream band and you wanted to know the depth of a stream, you'd walk out and out and out until you hit the parallel force field, and your rod would move, saying you found it. And if I'd walked 40 meters in one direction, it would be 40 meters down in the ground. It was a depthing method called the bishop's rule. Now, this type of energy field comes up out of the ground, and it's so highly charged with this type of water that it gives off geopathic stress, which all dowsers would agree. You shouldn't live above that, okay? It is quite carcinogenic to a certain degree. Now, in Germany, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a very pioneer doctor called Dr. Kathy Batchelor. And what Dr. Kathy Batchelor did was she analyzed 11,000 homes in Germany to find out why occupant after occupant would buy a particular house and end up with cancer. Okay? And what she found out was that you have these geopathic stress zones, and one of the most dangerous is this type of underground water, because it gives off a really jarred Hertz field, if you will. Okay? So that's an energy that the geomantic masters of yesteryear certainly knew about. And if you go to the stately homes in England, if you go to Queenie's house, Buckingham Palace, for example, no geopathic stress, only the harmonic, yeah? And the Masons looked for the particular signs as well. And that's another type of water we're going to have a look at in a moment, because have a look at some of how the stately homes and the early founding fathers of your landscape built things, and you start to see a picture emerging. So all the aristocracy in England, for example, built their stately home in the middle of their land. That's very important. They tried to find an energy pattern called a spiral, a geospiral. They placed a stately home above it, and then you go down a big sweeping drive, turn around in a circle, and that's how you enter, because you're flowing in on the energies and you're entering the home like that. It's a very Masonic design canon. And, you know, if it's good enough for the Masons, it's good enough for us. Yeah? Because they know how to live longer and healthy in harmony with the earth. They truly do. So when we look to a different type of water, and this was the energies that are at every single ancient site worldwide, it was one of their first design canons, was to look for sacred yin water. Now, yin water is born within the womb of Gaia, completely independent of rainfall. It's perpetual. It will never run out. It's chemically produced in Gaia, okay? And it emits a spiral pattern we'll have a look at in a moment that is completely harmonic. And any groundwater, that's the geopathic stress we saw earlier, that flows into the spiral pattern becomes harmonic, okay? So when in the future there's going to be a bit of a battle over water, and it's coming, okay, there is going to be a battle over water, then we can say, well, we can look for the spiral pattern, and it's perpetual. Yeah? It's constantly being made in the womb of Gaia. And the ancient Chinese knew this very well, and I have been in the good fortune to have been taught Western Dowsing, Eastern Dowsing from Chinese geomants, and Egyptian Dowsing as well. So the way the Chinese have always said their ancient capital of Beijing, Peking, modern-day Beijing, they said it was above a sea of sacred yin water, a sea that they said was so big that it would always protect China. Okay, so it was only until recently with sonic testing that they found out it was bigger than that. It's the size of the North Sea, yeah? And again, in kind of Masonic understanding, if you have a river flowing of this sacred yin water, you have harmonic energy and currency. Yeah, it's a current. And they associate that with money as well. So the financial capital, for example, of London is set above, yin water. Yeah, and it's on a ley system that's a triangular ley system that links to the financial center of San Francisco, above underground water, that then links to Turin, where the Holy Shroud is, okay? And that's called a black ley triangle system. It's very, very strange indeed. But when we look to the harmonic energies, we see the geospiral energy pattern here, which transmutes geopathic stress, always, like I said, at the esoteric center of a monument. It has a healing energy field. Yep, really very powerful. And this is what the elongated skulled people were looking for. But what does water have? Memory. doesn't it? Yeah? So when we are above this energy field, be that in Egypt or wherever, in some of your sacred sites here in the US as well, then you can start to interact with the Akashic records of Gaia, for instance, okay? You can start to learn about the holy history of a site, and you really can by tapping into that Akashic record that is there. And all it requires is asking for permission to work with the guardians, the ancestors, and the spirit of place. And the spirit of place wants to communicate with us now more than ever. Yeah? It's almost like the ancient sites are singing a song and saying, nobody's listening. And we need to listen to those harmonics again. And when we're in this energy field, it's very, very healing to us as well. And that's been muted by a lot of researchers. Well, how does it heal? Yes, it's got a harmonic hertz frequency, but surely there's more to it than that. And there is, which we'll touch on in a moment. There's an ancient site that's what we call in England. That's okay. I've done that myself before, so no worries there at all. So I'm going to take you now to a monument built by the Neolithic people in the second largest stone circle in England. The first largest stone circle, in fact, in the world, is just down the road for me at Avebury-Henge. It is massive. It's 1,000 meters across, 1,000 feet, across, and you could fit up to 2,000 people in Avebury-Henge. When you compare that to Stonehenge, Stonehenge is 98 feet across, and you can only have a limited amount of people in Stonehenge. Stanton drew, which we're going to have a look at now, and this is the remnants of what's called a Cove feature, and a Cove feature is like this megalithic enclosure in a horseshoe shape, where if you stand inside that horseshoe shape, you feel megalithic energy all around you. And beneath that, we have a massive, massive yin water creating a 21 coil spiral energy field, okay? So that's really a very intense place. And what I love about Stanton Drew is that, unlike Stonehenge, you can go there by day or by night freely and touch the stones, because ever since 2010, you've been denied to touch the stones at Stonehenge. You're not even allowed to touch them. Yeah. You have to just go close to them. And if you go too close to them, then they try to kick you out of the site. Because in 2010, heading up to 2012, it was almost like Stonehenge had a reboot, yeah? It really wanted to make loads and loads of downloads freely for people, and that's when the security was heightened and you couldn't go near the stones. And there's so many times where I've been literally a foot away from a stone, and they're saying, you're close to it again. You're doing this deliberately, you know, and sometimes I really do keep the peace, but then sometimes I just mutter, oh, get back to your nightclub, and then I know I'm on dodgy ground. Oh yes, Stanton Drew is the second largest stone circle. That's a wonderful point in a wonderful county called Somerset, near somewhere called Glastonbury, that is quite a famous place on the tourist people that come to southern England. So that's Stanton Drew, and Stanton Drew is massive. Again, it's been calculated by mathematicians and archaeologists that you could fit up to 2,500 people in Stanton Drew, okay? So what were the ancients up to then? Putting in thousands of people into an ancient site at the same time is truly incredible. Now, deep, deep, deep underground yin water produces the spiral pattern, then a circular shape, and then a horseshoe shape. That's a very sacred symbol of the very deep waters. And again, it's very expensive to bore because you go through quite a few diamond heads. And I used to be a water diviner back in my younger days. I find it very stressful now, unless people are in a drought situation and or in places like South Africa where people don't have access to water. That's the only time I well bore now, because unless it's necessity, I feel that it really does jar Gaia's energy.